Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. We are taking a look at another indie comic. I recently got Disintegration Street Volume 3. This is a comic from Brendan Swan, and it continues to be a very interesting read. Now, I've reviewed all three volumes of this, well, the other two volumes of this really, on this channel already, as well as the side comic Strange Love. Swan's work is very interesting. Strange Love, I believe, was produced digitally, while this is produced entirely through traditional methods. He hand draws everything and colors it himself using markers the old-fashioned way, and you can see it. You can see it on every page of this book. It looks very nice. But let's start by talking about the book itself, as we typically do. This is a what looks like 5x8 book. I haven't actually measured it with a ruler, but it looks like it's about 5.5 to 8x8.5, about a half sheet of paper size, and it's really nice. I actually like this size of book. You can carry it very well. It's light, it's easy to read, it feels great in the hand. The pages are not super glossy, but they do have a very nice feel to them. They read very well. In fact, I prefer this kind of somewhat matte finish to a highly glossy finish because there's a lot less glare. You can see, even when the light catches it, it's still very easy to read everything. You can see all the art nicely. It's very clear. The binding is good quality. This is a great book. I would be interested to know who Brendan's printer is because they do a great job with this. I like it. And yeah, there's not a whole lot bad to say about it. There's just 2 points. It is, again, very small. And if you are OCD and you like to keep books of a specific size together on your shelf, you may have a hard time finding other books to put with this because it is a very specific size, for lack of a better way to put it. You won't find many books, especially comics of this size, out there. That may be a negative for you. Personally, I don't mind it. While it does kind of tweak my OCD if books in a series are different sizes. I mentioned that before when I was talking about the Mary Sue series. All of Disintegration Street has been this size. I don't have a physical copy of Strange Love. I got a PDF for that because the Kickstarter I backed was running a little bit late, so Swan added that as a bonus, which was very nice of him. It wasn't something we expected, but he added it as a thank you for being patient to the audience, which I really liked. That was a very classy move on his part. Anyway, I can't comment on what size Strangelove is, but I would expect it would be the same. The other thing about this, the size of this book specifically is, it can be a little hard. I would think, especially if the art gets too detailed, to pick out all the details. Now, Swan does not have the most detailed style. So I don't find myself, looking too closely at it most of the time, which is good. I think overall that's positive. But that does kind of bring us along nicely to the art itself. And Swan has a very painterly style, for lack of a better way to put it. His art reminds me kind of traditional Japanese ink painting. You can see there is some attention to realism paid here, but a lot of it is very stylized, and that's going to be very much to taste. Whether you like it or not is going to depend on how much you like very stylized art. There is a kind of, again, a looseness and a fluidity to the line work that reminds me of ink painting, which I like very much. There is sometimes issues with perspective, and let me see if I can find a good page to give an example here. That is not the best. Most of this happens at times when Gon is using his power. Here's a good example where we have Gon using his powers to manipulate shadows and create several hands, and it looks a little flat. It's very hard to tell what is in the background and what is in the foreground of that shot. Now, Swan has improved since the last volume, where some things were not very clear. In particular, he had an ice user there who it could be hard to parse what was going on. there was a lot of jagged lines in the panels, and it was hard to tell what was the foreground, what was the background, what was forced perspective, and what was supposed to be, relatively flat on the page, as it were. He's much better with that in this volume, which is good. He's improving a lot. And in particular, he has some shots that I really like this cover to the third chapter where we have this water splashing in the background. I think that's a really great example of what Swan is capable of in this volume. Very good work. He has put a lot of thought into improving how action looks and his composition to make things easier to understand. Let's talk about the story, and there is going to be some spoilers for previous volumes of Disintegration Street because we're in the middle, literally, of the story. According to his backer emails, this is 3 of 5, volume 3 of 5. So we are really in the build to the climax now, and it's very hard to talk about this without talking about previous volumes. I'm going to try and do it a little bit, but it is kind of important to touch on some of these points. We know that Charlotte, our protagonist, who we see here at the center in the black dress, is a ghost. And in Disintegration Street, that's not particularly surprising. Ghosts and regular people live hand in hand here. And in fact, many people who come from Disintegration Street, who are born here, later die and become ghosts. That's assuming they continue to remain here after their 4th birthday. One of the interesting ongoing mysteries here is that children disappear on their 4th birthday, and no one is entirely sure why or what happens to them. And Charlotte has been trying to investigate this and figure it out, along with her friends Gon, Akiko Sakamoto, who is a PI, and Lillian. And the first couple of volumes here really focus more on the mystery and setting up a bunch of characters. There is a confrontation with one of the villain Ramona's henchmen in the second volume, which is very interesting and really plays up a fairly important part of this volume, which is the fact that ghosts have powers and they can use them to battle each other. You can't really kill a ghost unless you destroy its head, and that also makes for some interesting part of these fights. But really, the first couple of volumes are set up. They're setting up all the characters, they're setting up the mystery, and now we are working our way towards a solution. At the end of the last volume, Mr. Mayor, the mayor of Disintegration Street, and Mr. Mayor is his name, not necessarily his rank, so there's a little bit of goofiness there, but there is kind of a tongue-in-cheek tone to a lot of Disintegration Street when it's not playing with horror tropes, which it does both of those and pretty well. So at the end of the last volume, after defeating one of Ramona's henchmen, our crew is getting ready to confront Mr. Mayor because they thought he was in league with Ramona. In this volume, we learn he is in league with Ramona, but he's also working at cross purposes with Ramona. They are allied, but it is an alliance of convenience and is no longer convenient for either party. So at this point, Mr. Mayor seems to be trying to replace Ramona. That is the general impression I got from reading this stage of the story, although his exact motivations are a little more complicated than that. We'll just say that I think overall, while Mr. Mayor had good intentions, he's probably a little too ruthless to ever really accomplish what it seems like he wanted to accomplish in this volume. And so ultimately he is defeated by our protagonists. And this part of the story is pretty straightforward. There is some interesting build-up to the mystery of who exactly Ramona is, and there is an interesting twist with the private investigator. But for the most part, the reveal at this stage of the game is that Dr. Andy Stone, who is a ghost expert, has built a robot, Amy Sekihara, who is the town idol and who has been an ongoing character, and is now revealed as a robot. And Dr. Stone has been researching how he can give robots the special abilities of ghosts that he harvests, for lack of a better term. And there's a pretty neat fight sequence in here with Gon and Lillian and Charlotte that I thought was inventive and made pretty good use of super abilities. The big thing, I think, is that I would have liked to see more of is that Sekihara is supposed to be able to take in and use ghost abilities, and she only has one ability that was specifically chosen to give her a counter to Gon's ability. I would have liked to see maybe this ghost power system expanded a little bit more. So maybe at this point, if we had had 4 or 5 ghost battles instead of just really 2 at this point, maybe we could have seen Amy using a few other ghost powers and switch those up more. I think this is a good idea for a big battle, the climax of a volume story arc. But I think it would have been better as the Volume 4 climax, so Amy could have been a little more creative with the powers she used, and etc. Maybe there's going to be another robot that Dr. Stone employs in Volume 4 that will be, a little more expansive like that. We'll have to see. He does seem to be getting the build-up as the antagonist for Volume 4. All in all, this is a pretty good part of an ongoing story. It's a great installment, but it is not a starting point. I think you could have taken Volume 2 as your starting point and gone back and picked up Volume 1. I really wouldn't recommend it at this point. So while I did enjoy Disintegration Street Volume 3, and I think it builds very well on the previous volumes, I would recommend picking up Volume 1 or 2 and reading that before you read Volume 3 if you're interested in what I'm talking about here. As always, this is kind of a horror story. This volume feels less like a horror story than and more of an action story than preceding volumes. I think that's okay. It still does have some of that really disturbing imagery that I really liked in the previous volumes to give you a sense of unease and discomfort and a real understanding that something unnatural and possibly even evil is going on here, although it's hard to tell for sure because we still don't know all the motivations of everyone involved. At the very least, it is evil in the sense that people are doing things that are very unhealthy with no concern for the consequences that other people will suffer for these actions. So all in all, it is a good story with an art style that suits that story, but will not necessarily appeal to everyone. And if you are looking for that kind of horror film Scooby-Doo level story, Disintegration Street is really good. And it does that. It's fun. It's fun to read. And yeah, I think it's just going to be a matter of taste whether the art and the humor is for you or not. Anyway, Disintegration Street Volume 3. If you've been following the story, this is a pretty good payoff for what you've read so far. If you're not into the story yet, I would try and find one of the previous volumes. I believe Brendan Swan has a website with a store where you can buy these. So I would recommend checking out a previous volume if anything you've heard about this one interests you. That's all I've got for you today. There's a like button and a subscribe button down below. You can use those as you see fit. And I'll talk to you later.